Hey there, family. Don't that caramel cake look good? Y'all, don't this just remind you of grandma and great grandma's house? So join me while I make my Delta style caramel cake for you today. So I got to start off with 2 sticks of unsalted butter and then a half a stick of butter flavored Crisco shortening. And then I whip that for about 5 minutes or so until it's nice and fluffy. And then once it gets fluffy like I want it, I add in 2.5 cups of sugar, just making sure that it's evenly distributed. 2 large eggs at room temperature. All right, add those in, and then you're gonna have yourself 3.5 cups of sifted flour. You're gonna add 1 tablespoon of baking powder to that, and half of a tablespoon of salt. Then you're gonna add in your flour and milk, and then I use a cup and a half of milk, but then I add a little bit of milk with a little bit of flour until I get it all mixed into the cake batter. But you don't want to rush it. And then I also add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. All right. And then once your batter is all done, it's going to be looking something like this. And I make sure I get all of it. All right. And then you're going to take your pans and I grease it down, and I use my greasing mixture. It's just equal parts shortening, flour, and vegetable oil. And I whip that up and then spread it all around my pans, and I even distribute the cake batter. And you just want to make sure you get that cake batter nice and spread out, and it's spread across those 9-inch pans. And yes, it's 9-inch cake pans. And then I got that oven set on 350. I'm gonna pop them in there for about 35 minutes, and then I take my raw spaghetti noodle just to make sure it's cooked. And then after 15 minutes or so, I take them out of the pan, just scrape those edges and corners, and then let them cool. Now you got to make your caramel sauce. And I take 1 stick of salted butter and a half a stick of unsalted butter, melt that down, and then you're going to add 3 cups of sugar. Yes, 3 full cups of sugar once you get that butter melted down. And then you're going to begin to mix that. So you're going to have to spend like 10 or 15 minutes with this. So use your strong arm, all right? Because you're going to mix and stir constantly, because you cannot let this butter burn during this process, or the sugar burn, because you will ruin the caramel and you will literally need to start over from scratch. So go ahead, and then once you get it to the color that you want, I add in my can of evaporated milk, and you want to add in a little bit at a time until it doesn't bubble up like that. And then once you get that evaporated milk mixed in well, you see it's starting to really take on that texture and that color. And once it gets to that point, I take a can of sweetened condensed milk, and then I mix that in, and it makes that nice thick caramel texture. And then I add myself in 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. You don't want that vanilla extract to overwhelm the caramel. And then you just put a little caramel at the base, put that first layer down, put your first layer of caramel, and I just let it dry a little, and then put a little more on top, just so that you get nice thick even layers so that you see it in every bite. And then when I get the third layer on top, I take 4 pieces of raw spaghetti to just stabilize the cake. And then I make sure I glaze that caramel all around that cake. I mean, it's just reminding me of sitting in the kitchen with my grandma Rose and listen to the stories about my elders and how they made these cakes in the Delta. And they said my great grandmother's caramel cake was the best thing you ever had, and it was the ugliest thing ever. But I gotta take a nice slice because it ain't over till I give it a taste, y'all. So we gonna pull it out. I mean, just look at that cake, and it is delicious. It's making me miss home. You gotta love it. So God bless y'all. I hope you try it, and thank you for sticking around with your cousin Vincent. I'm gonna take care of you. Be blessed.